Welcome to Legends of Humanity, the international history channel that brings to life the stories of the extraordinary individuals who shaped our world. In today's journey, we delve into the life of Simón Bolívar, the liberator of South America, who led 6 nations to independence from Spanish rule. From a lonely orphan in colonial Venezuela to a military genius and visionary statesman, Bolívar's legacy is one of courage, conviction, and the relentless pursuit of continental unity. His life is not only a tale of glory, but also a profound reflection on sacrifice, leadership, and the burdens of revolution. Childhood and early orphanhood. The air of Caracas, even in the late 18th century, carried a distinct scent of possibility, mingled with the earthy aroma of tropical flora and the lingering scent of old Spanish grandeur. It was into this vibrant, yet politically restless atmosphere that Simón Bolívar was born on July 24, 1783. His full name, a resonant echo of his noble lineage, was Simón José Antonio de la Santísima Trinidad Bolívar y Palacios. The family, the Bolívar y Palacios, stood among the wealthiest and most influential criollos, American-born Spaniards, in the Captaincy General of Venezuela. Their prosperity was rooted deeply in vast landholdings, lucrative mining operations, and expansive sugar plantations, all sustained by the labor of enslaved people. This privileged birthright, while affording him immense advantages, also placed him within the intricate web of colonial power and the brewing undercurrents of discontent. His parents were Don Juan Vicente Bolívar y Ponte, a man of considerable intellect and a colonel in the local militia, and Doña María de la Concepción Palacios y Blanco, a woman of refined beauty and strong character. Their union cemented the family's already formidable position within Caracas society. Young Simón's early years were spent in the comfortable confines of their ancestral estate, where he was surrounded by the luxuries befitting his station. He was a child of vivacious spirit, often described as energetic and inquisitive, with a keen intelligence that sparkled in his eyes. Yet, the idyllic facade of his early childhood was tragically short-lived. The first shadow to fall upon the young Bolívar was the death of his father, Don Juan Vicente, in January 1786. Simón was barely 2.5 years old. The loss left an indelible mark on the family, and the once vibrant household took on a more somber tone. His mother, Doña María, a woman of remarkable fortitude, assumed the formidable task of managing the family's vast estates and raising her 4 young children, María Antonia, Juana Nepomucena, Juan Vicente, and the youngest, Simón. She dedicated herself to their upbringing, instilling in them the values of their noble heritage and the importance of education. However, fate dealt another cruel blow. Just 7 years after her husband's passing, in July 1792, Doña María de la Concepción also succumbed to illness. Simón was then only 9 years old. This second, profound loss plunged him into the true depths of orphanhood. The boy, who had once been the spirited center of his parents' affection, was now adrift, reliant on the extended family. His care initially fell to his maternal grandfather, Don Feliciano Palacios y Sojo, a cultured and respectable man who endeavored to provide stability. Yet, the grandfather too was an elderly man, and his passing shortly thereafter left Simón under the guardianship of his uncle, Don Carlos Palacios y Blanco. Life under the guardianship of his uncle, while materially secure, lacked the warmth and intimacy of his early family life. Don Carlos, though well-meaning, was a busy and somewhat detached figure, more accustomed to managing estates than nurturing a sensitive and intelligent child. Simón, a boy of fiery temperament and independent spirit, found the rigid structure and emotional distance stifling. He often chafed under his uncle's authority, yearning for the freedom and intellectual stimulation that seemed absent from his immediate surroundings. This period marked the beginning of a restless search for belonging and purpose, a subtle dissatisfaction with the confines of his privileged yet isolated existence. It was in this environment of both affluence and emotional void that the seeds of his future quest for liberty, perhaps, began to stir, a yearning for something greater than the gilded cage of colonial aristocracy. Marriage and tragedy. The void left by his parents' absence and the somewhat detached environment of his uncle's home profoundly shaped young Simón. It fostered within him a fierce independence, a thirst for knowledge, and a yearning for a deeper connection than his aristocratic Caracas upbringing seemed to offer. Recognizing his nephew's restless intellect, Don Carlos Palacios, along with other family members, ensured Simón received an extensive education. He had several tutors, but none left as profound an impression as Simón Rodriguez, a remarkable figure who would become a pivotal mentor. Rodriguez, a free-spirited and unconventional thinker, deeply influenced by the Enlightenment philosophers like Rousseau, instilled in Bolívar a love for liberty, a critical perspective on society, and a passion for learning. He encouraged Bolívar to think for himself, to question established norms, and to embrace the ideals of individual freedom and self-determination. These lessons, absorbed during his formative years, would echo throughout Bolívar's later life. At the age of 16, in 1799, Bolívar embarked on a journey that was customary for young men of his standing, a grand tour of Europe. This period was intended to complete his education and refine his manners, exposing him to the cultural and intellectual currents of the Old World. He traveled extensively through Spain, France, and Italy, immersing himself in the vibrant societies, visiting art galleries, attending salons, and engaging with prominent thinkers. Europe, at the turn of the 19th century, was a cauldron of political upheaval and intellectual ferment, still reeling from the French Revolution and grappling with the rise of Napoleon. Bolívar, with his sharp mind and receptive spirit, absorbed these influences, witnessing firsthand the radical shifts in power and ideology. It was during his time in Madrid, a city of courtly elegance and fervent intellectual discourse, that Bolívar met Maria Teresa Rodriguez del Toro y Eliza. She was a distant relative, a Criolla of noble lineage, and a young woman of exquisite grace and refined beauty. Their connection was immediate and profound. Simón, often described as passionate and impetuous, fell deeply in love with Maria Teresa. She embodied a gentle tranquility that seemed to complement his fiery nature, offering a sense of stability and warmth that had been largely absent from his solitary adolescence. They knew each other for approximately 2 years before their wedding, their love blossoming amidst the formal yet romantic backdrop of Spanish society. Despite the initial reservations of some family members, owing to Bolívar's youth and his reputation for a somewhat unrestrained temperament, their love prevailed. In May 1802, Simón Bolívar, then 19 years old, married Maria Teresa Rodriguez del Toro y Eliza in Madrid. It was a union born of genuine affection and held the promise of a joyful future. Shortly after their wedding, the young couple decided to return to Venezuela, to the sun-drenched estates of the Bolívar family in Aragua. Simón was eager to introduce his beloved wife to his homeland, to settle into the life of a respected planter, and to build a family. However, their idyllic future was tragically cut short. Upon their arrival in Venezuela, the tropical climate, to which Maria Teresa was unaccustomed, proved to be merciless. Within a few months of their return, she contracted a tropical illness, likely yellow fever or malaria, and tragically passed away in January 1803, less than a year after their wedding. Bolívar was left a widower at the tender age of 20. The loss was cataclysmic, shattering his dreams of a settled domestic life and plunging him into a profound grief that bordered on despair. This immense personal tragedy served as a brutal turning point in his life. The stability he had briefly found, the solace of love and companionship, was ripped away. It was a wound that never fully healed, and in its wake, it left an emptiness that, some historians argue, he sought to fill with a grander, more encompassing passion, the liberation of his homeland. The path of the planter, the quiet life of a wealthy Criollo, no longer held any appeal. Instead, a new, undefined purpose began to stir in the depths of his wounded soul. Oath of liberation in Europe. The crushing grief over Maria Teresa's death left Bolívar profoundly shaken. The idyllic vision of a settled life in Venezuela, tending to his estates with his beloved wife, evaporated like morning mist. The vast emptiness of his loss propelled him back to Europe, not merely for a change of scenery, but for a desperate search for meaning. He arrived in Madrid in 1803, a city that now held painful memories, and subsequently journeyed through France and Italy. This second European sojourn was vastly different from his first. No longer a carefree young man on a grand tour, he was now a solitary, brooding widower, his mind grappling with existential questions and a burgeoning sense of destiny. In Paris, the intellectual heart of Europe, Bolívar reconnected with his former tutor, Simón Rodríguez. This reunion proved to be one of the most pivotal encounters of his life. Rodríguez, ever the revolutionary idealist, recognized the raw potential and the deep-seated sorrow in his former student. He saw beyond the grief-stricken young man to a spirit yearning for a grander purpose. Rodríguez, with his fervent belief in Enlightenment ideals, began to systematically guide Bolívar's intellectual and political awakening. They spent countless hours discussing philosophy, history, and the political ferment sweeping across the continent. Bolívar devoured the works of Montesquieu, Voltaire, and Rousseau, whose ideas on popular sovereignty, human rights, and republicanism resonated deeply with his own burgeoning anti-colonial sentiments. He witnessed firsthand the imperial ambitions of Napoleon Bonaparte, initially admiring his genius, but gradually growing disillusioned with his authoritarian tendencies. The summer of 1805 found Bolívar and Rodríguez in Italy, a journey that would culminate in a moment of profound personal revelation. They traveled on foot, absorbing the historical grandeur of Rome, the birthplace of republics and empires. The city's ancient ruins, silent witnesses to both liberty and tyranny, spoke to Bolívar's increasingly awakened political consciousness. It was against this backdrop of historical significance, on August 15, 1805, atop the Monte Sacro, Aventine Hill in some accounts, that Simón Bolívar made a solemn and enduring vow. Standing with his mentor, gazing upon the panorama of the eternal city, Bolívar, then 22 years old, declared with unwavering conviction, "I swear before you, I swear by the God of my fathers, I swear by my country, that I shall not allow my arm to rest, nor my soul to repose, until I have broken the chains that bind us to the will of Spain." This was not a mere impulsive utterance, but a deeply felt commitment, born from his personal anguish, his intellectual maturation, and the pervasive political currents of his time. It was a fusion of his private tragedy with a nascent public mission. The death of Maria Teresa had closed off one path. This oath opened another, grander, and far more perilous one. This oath, made under the open sky of Rome, marked the definitive transition of Simón Bolívar from a grieving aristocrat into a nascent revolutionary. It solidified his resolve to dedicate his life to the liberation of Hispanic America from Spanish rule. From that moment forward, his personal sorrow began to transmute into a fierce, unwavering determination for collective freedom. He returned to his native Venezuela in 1807, no longer the aimless, heartbroken youth who had left, but a man irrevocably set on a course, guided by the intellectual fire of the Enlightenment and the raw passion of his solemn promise. The aristocratic upbringing, the early losses, the European exposure, and the transformative influence of Rodríguez had converged, forging the future liberator. The chains he swore to break were not just those of a colonial empire, but perhaps, in a deeper sense, the invisible bonds of his own past, sublimated into a cause that would consume his very being. Early uprisings and exile upon his return to Venezuela in 1807, Simón Bolívar found a colony seething with suppressed resentment against Spanish rule, yet lacking a unified vision for resistance. The echoes of his Roman oath, a private commitment, began to resonate with the public disquiet. The European political landscape, heavily influenced by Napoleon's conquests, soon provided the catalyst for change in the Americas. When Napoleon invaded Spain in 1808, deposed King Ferdinand VII, and placed his own brother, Joseph Bonaparte, on the Spanish throne, the legitimacy of colonial rule in the Americas was severely shaken. Criollo elites, who had long chafed under Spanish economic and political restrictions, saw an unprecedented opportunity to assert their own authority, often initially in the name of the deposed king, but with an underlying current of independence. Caracas, a city ripe for rebellion, erupted on April 19, 1810. The local junta, composed of prominent criollos, effectively declared autonomy from the Spanish regency, though not yet outright independence from Spain. Bolívar, a wealthy and articulate figure from a distinguished family, quickly emerged as a leading voice within this nascent revolutionary movement. His intellectual prowess, his experience in Europe, and his fervent belief in republican ideals made him a natural advocate for self-governance. He was appointed to a diplomatic mission to Great Britain, alongside Andrés Bello and Luis López Méndez, tasked with securing British recognition and support for the new Venezuelan junta. While in London, Bolívar sought to gain political and military aid, and though he did not achieve direct British military intervention, he did succeed in securing a degree of unofficial support and, perhaps more importantly, made a crucial connection with Francisco de Miranda, the Venezuelan precursor of independence, who had long championed the cause of a free South America from his exile in London. Miranda, a seasoned revolutionary with a global reputation, returned to Venezuela with Bolívar in 1810, bringing a renewed sense of purpose and experience to the movement. The First Venezuelan Republic was declared on July 5, 1811, a bold and audacious step that formally severed ties with Spain. Bolívar was a passionate proponent of this declaration, advocating for a complete break from colonial rule. However, the fledgling republic was plagued by internal divisions between Federalists and Centralists and by a lack of cohesive military strength. A devastating earthquake in March 1812, interpreted by some as divine retribution, further weakened the Republican cause. Spanish loyalist forces, led by figures like Domingo Monteverde, capitalized on these weaknesses, launching a brutal counter-offensive. The First Republic ultimately collapsed in July 1812. Miranda, facing overwhelming odds, signed an armistice with the Spanish, a decision that Bolívar and many others viewed as a betrayal. In the chaotic aftermath, Miranda was captured by the Spanish, a fate perhaps sealed by Bolívar's own hand in handing him over to the Spanish in La Guaira, believing Miranda had deserted the cause. Bolívar himself was forced to flee, seeking refuge in the neighboring viceroyalty of New Granada, modern-day Colombia. This exile marked a period of profound reflection for Bolívar. It was here, in Cartagena, that he penned the influential Manifesto of Cartagena in December 1812. In this crucial document, he analyzed the reasons for the First Republic's failure, attributing it to internal disunity, Federalist excesses, and the lack of a strong, centralized government capable of effectively waging war and maintaining order. He called for a united effort to liberate New Granada and then march on Venezuela, stressing the urgency of a coordinated military strategy. The Manifesto of Cartagena served as a powerful call to action, articulating Bolívar's emerging political philosophy and his understanding of the challenges facing the independence movement. It transformed him from a participant in the initial uprising into a clear-sighted strategist and a determined leader. Though forced into exile and having witnessed the bitter taste of defeat, Bolívar's resolve was not broken. Instead, the setbacks fueled his conviction, sharpening his vision for a united, independent South America. His early experiences with political fragmentation and military defeat forged in him a relentless pragmatism, tempered by the enduring idealism of his Roman oath. He was no longer just a revolutionary. He was becoming a liberator, learning from failure and preparing for the arduous campaigns that lay ahead. Andy's campaign and military rise-having articulated his vision in the Manifesto of Cartagena. Bolívar wasted no time. His exile in New Granada was not a period of retreat, but of intense preparation and strategic planning. He quickly gained the support of the local authorities and began to assemble a force, albeit a modest one, with the aim of liberating Venezuela. This bold initiative, known as the Admirable Campaign, commenced in 1813. It was a testament to his burgeoning military prowess and his ability to inspire loyalty. Leading a small but determined army, Bolívar embarked on a relentless march across the Andes, a feat of immense logistical and physical challenge. The journey itself was fraught with peril, traversing treacherous mountain passes and enduring harsh weather conditions. Yet, with each victory along the way, his forces swelled as eager recruits, drawn by the promise of freedom and Bolívar's charisma, flocked to his banner. His campaign culminated in a series of decisive victories against the Spanish royalist forces. He systematically liberated towns and cities, culminating in the triumphant re-entry into Caracas in August 1813. The city, which had witnessed his birth and his early grief, now hailed him as a liberator. It was during this period that the title of El Libertador was formally bestowed upon him by the municipality of Caracas, a recognition of his extraordinary achievements and the profound hope he embodied for the Venezuelan people. The Second Venezuelan Republic was proclaimed, with Bolívar at its helm, now wielding significant political and military authority. However, the euphoria of liberation was short-lived. The Second Republic, like its predecessor, faced formidable challenges: internal divisions, economic instability, and the enduring strength of royalist forces, particularly those led by the ruthless Boves and his fearsome Lanero cavalry, threatened its very existence. The Laneros, tough plainsmen, initially sided with the Spanish, drawn by promises of land and plunder, and proved to be a brutal and effective fighting force. Bolívar, despite his strategic brilliance, struggled to counter this new, unconventional threat and to unify the disparate factions within the patriot ranks. His efforts to establish a stable government were hampered by the ongoing warfare and the deep-seated social divisions within Venezuelan society. The relentless pressure from Boves' forces, coupled with a lack of consistent support and the exhaustion of his own troops, eventually led to the collapse of the Second Republic in late 1814. Caracas once again fell to the royalists. Bolívar, facing overwhelming odds and fearing for the survival of the independence cause, was forced into exile again, first to Cartagena and then, significantly, to Jamaica. This second exile was even more critical than the first. It was a period of intense reflection, a time to reassess strategies and to appeal for international support. In Jamaica, in September 1815, Bolívar penned his famous Letter from Jamaica, a profound intellectual and political treatise. In this letter, addressed to a prominent British merchant, he meticulously analyzed the historical context of Spanish America, assessed the challenges faced by the burgeoning independence movements, and articulated his grand vision for a united continent. He envisioned a confederation of independent republics, united by common language, culture, and a shared destiny, a political entity that would stand as a formidable force in the world. He acknowledged the immense difficulties ahead, but expressed an unshakable faith in the eventual triumph of liberty. The letter from Jamaica was not merely a cry for help. It was a blueprint for the future of South America, demonstrating Bolívar's evolving statesmanship and his unwavering commitment to a cause that transcended the immediate battlefield. It solidified his reputation not just as a military leader, but as a visionary statesman, preparing him for the arduous campaigns that would ultimately lead to true liberation. Battle of Carabobo and Venezuela's freedom, the letter from Jamaica solidified Bolívar's intellectual standing, but the immediate need was military action. From Jamaica and later Haiti, where he received crucial support from President Alexandre Pétion, Bolívar meticulously planned his next offensive. He learned from past mistakes, the need for better discipline, a unified command, and, crucially, the enlistment of the Llaneros, who had previously been his adversaries. His strategic brilliance began to shine, understanding that to truly win, he needed to appeal to a broader base, including the enslaved population, by promising freedom for their service. In 1816, Bolívar launched a series of expeditions from Haiti, slowly re-establishing a foothold on the Venezuelan coast. These early forays were difficult, marked by skirmishes and setbacks, but they allowed him to rebuild his forces and gain invaluable experience. A critical turning point came with his alliance with José Antonio Páez, the charismatic and formidable Llanero chieftain. Páez, initially a royalist, was persuaded to join the independence cause, bringing with him his highly effective cavalry. This alliance was instrumental, providing Bolívar with the light, swift forces needed to combat the Spanish in the open plains. Bolívar also began to secure more consistent foreign aid, including British and Irish volunteers, who brought valuable military training and experience. The years between 1817 and 1819 were a period of relentless campaigning, marked by strategic retreats, daring maneuvers, and a relentless pursuit of the Spanish. Bolívar established his base in Angostura, now Ciudad Bolívar, where in 1819 he convened the Congress of Angostura. Here, he delivered one of his most profound political speeches, outlining his vision for a strong, centralized republican government for Gran Colombia, a proposed union of Venezuela, New Granada, and Ecuador. This Congress laid the political groundwork for his military aspirations, providing legitimacy and a clear objective for his campaigns. With the political foundation laid, Bolívar embarked on one of his most audacious military feats, the crossing of the Andes into New Granada in 1819. This was a monumental undertaking, leading his army through treacherous, icy mountain passes, facing extreme weather and logistical nightmares. It was a testament to his iron will and the unwavering loyalty he now commanded. The element of surprise was complete. The Spanish, not expecting an attack from such an impossible direction, were caught off guard. This daring maneuver culminated in the decisive Battle of Boyacá on August 7, 1819. The victory at Boyacá was a turning point, effectively liberating New Granada and securing the vital resources and manpower needed to continue the struggle for Venezuelan independence. With New Granada secured, Bolívar turned his attention back to Venezuela. The final, decisive confrontation for Venezuelan freedom came on June 24, 1821, at the Battle of Carabobo. This battle was the culmination of years of relentless struggle, sacrifice, and strategic brilliance. Bolívar, leading a combined force of patriots from Venezuela, New Granada, and foreign volunteers, faced a well-entrenched Spanish royalist army. The battle was fierce and hard-fought, but the disciplined tactics of Bolívar's forces, combined with the ferocious charge of Páez's Llanero cavalry, broke the Spanish lines. The royalist army was routed, suffering a devastating defeat that effectively shattered their power in Venezuela. The victory at Carabobo was more than just a military triumph. It signified the definitive end of Spanish colonial rule in Venezuela. Caracas, the city of his birth, was finally and irrevocably free. Bolívar, now truly El Libertador of his homeland, had fulfilled a significant part of his Roman oath. Yet, his vision extended far beyond Venezuela's borders. The taste of victory in his homeland only sharpened his resolve to liberate the rest of South America, to realize the grand design of Gran Colombia, and to see a continent united under the banner of liberty. The struggle, he knew, was far from over, but a crucial, definitive chapter had closed with the resounding triumph on the fields of Carabobo. Gran Colombia and internal struggles with Venezuela's freedom secured at Carabobo, Bolívar immediately turned his formidable energy towards the realization of Gran Colombia, the vast, unified republic he had envisioned. The Congress of Angostura in 1819 had already laid the foundational stone for this ambitious project, uniting Venezuela and New Granada into a single political entity. Bolívar's immediate task was to integrate the newly liberated territories and extend the struggle southwards to liberate Quito, modern-day Ecuador, and further consolidate the nascent nation. His strategic vision was always grander than mere territorial liberation. He sought to forge a powerful, independent South American state capable of defending itself against foreign intervention and fostering internal prosperity. The military campaigns continued relentlessly. Bolivar dispatched his most trusted lieutenant Antonio José de Sucre southwards to liberate Quito. Sucre, a brilliant and loyal commander, achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Pichincha on May 24, 1822, effectively securing the independence of Ecuador and bringing it into the fold of Gran Colombia. Bolívar himself, after a long and arduous journey, met with Sucre in Quito, marking the culmination of this phase of the liberation. The vision of a united northern South America was rapidly becoming a reality. However, the creation of Gran Colombia, a territory vast and geographically diverse, immediately presented immense challenges. Unifying such disparate regions, each with its own local interests, historical grievances, and emerging caudillo, regional strongman, figures, proved to be far more complex than the military campaigns. Bolívar, the military genius, found himself grappling with the intricacies of nation building. The political structure he advocated, a strong, centralized executive, was often at odds with the federalist tendencies and regional autonomies desired by many within the constituent parts of Gran Colombia. Internal struggles began to fester almost immediately. Venezuela, exhausted by years of war, felt its interests were being overshadowed by Bogotá, the new capital of Gran Colombia. Local leaders like José Antonio Páez in Venezuela, who had been instrumental in the liberation, began to assert their regional power, often challenging Bolívar's authority. The economic integration was slow and difficult, and the administrative machinery of the new republic was still nascent and inefficient. Bolívar's dream of a cohesive, prosperous union was continually undermined by these centrifugal forces. Adding to the complexity was the growing philosophical divide among the liberators themselves. While Bolívar championed a robust executive to ensure stability and prevent fragmentation, others, like Francisco de Paula Santander in New Granada, favored a more liberal, federalist model with stronger legislative power. These ideological differences, initially manageable, gradually hardened into bitter political rivalries. Santander, who had effectively managed the civilian administration in Bogotá during Bolívar's military campaigns, increasingly resented Bolívar's perceived authoritarian tendencies and his prolonged absences on the battlefield. Bolívar spent much of his time away from Bogotá, leading further campaigns to liberate Peru and Upper Peru, which would become Bolivia, believing that the complete expulsion of Spanish power from the continent was paramount to Gran Colombia's security. His frequent absences, while necessary for the broader liberation, contributed to the political vacuum and allowed the internal divisions within Gran Colombia to deepen. The grand vision of unity, forged in the crucible of war, was beginning to crack under the strains of peacetime politics, regionalism, and ideological dissent. The very success of liberation paradoxically unleashed the forces that would ultimately threaten the unity Bolívar had fought so hard to achieve. Founding Bolivia, even as Gran Colombia grappled with its nascent internal struggles, Bolívar's gaze remained fixed on the larger objective, the complete expulsion of Spanish rule from the South American continent. The Spanish imperial stronghold remained in Peru, the wealthiest and most significant viceroyalty, and in Upper Peru. Bolívar believed that the liberation of these territories was essential for the long-term security and stability of the newly independent nations. Thus, in 1823, he embarked on his final, arduous military campaign, setting his sights on Peru, a land that had seen centuries of Spanish dominance. His journey to Peru was not without its challenges. The internal political turmoil in Peru, marked by feuding patriot factions and a strong royalist presence, made the task even more daunting. Bolívar arrived in Lima in September 1823, initially met with great fanfare and hailed as the savior. However, the political landscape was treacherous, and he soon found himself embroiled in complex power struggles even among those who nominally supported independence. Despite these difficulties, Bolívar, through sheer force of will and strategic genius, began to reorganize the fragmented patriot forces. He spent months meticulously planning the campaign, building up an army, and securing resources, often facing skepticism and resistance from local leaders. the decisive battles for Peruvian independence unfolded in 1824. On August 6, 1824, Bolivar's forces achieved a crucial victory at the Battle of Junín, a cavalry engagement fought on the high Andean plains without a single shot fired, relying solely on lances and sabers. This victory significantly weakened the Spanish Royalist army. The ultimate blow to Spanish power came several months later on December 9, 1824 at the Battle of Ayacucho. While Bolivar was not personally present at Ayacucho, having delegated command to his brilliant and loyal lieutenant, Antonio José de Sucre, the victory was a direct result of Bolivar's strategic preparations and the momentum he had built. Ayacucho proved to be the final crushing defeat for the main Spanish forces in South America, effectively ending nearly 3 centuries of colonial rule. Following the victory at Ayacucho, the independence of Upper Peru, modern-day Bolivia, became the next logical step. Bolivar personally traveled to the region in 1825 to oversee its liberation and the establishment of a new political entity. The people of Upper Peru, eager to forge their own destiny separate from both Peru and the distant Buenos Aires, chose to create an independent republic. In August 1825, the General Assembly of Upper Peru declared its independence, and in an act of profound deference and gratitude, named the new nation Bolivia in honor of its liberator. Bolivar was tasked with drafting the constitution for this new republic. He proposed a highly centralized and strong executive system, with a lifetime presidency, a concept that reflected his growing conviction about the need for stability and strong leadership to prevent the fragmentation he witnessed in Gran Colombia. This Bolivian constitution, though reflecting his profound political thought, was met with mixed reactions, viewed by some as too autocratic. While his vision for Bolivia was clear, his involvement also highlighted his increasing disillusionment with liberal federalist ideals and his leanings towards a more authoritarian model to preserve the newly won independence from internal chaos and external threats. The founding of Bolivia was a triumphant moment, a testament to his relentless pursuit of continental liberation, but it also marked the beginning of his deeper entanglement in the political complexities and ideological battles that would define his final years. Betrayal and decline, the triumphs of Junín and Ayacucho, culminating in the founding of Bolivia, represented the zenith of Bolivar's military career. With Spanish power decisively broken across the continent, his focus shifted entirely to the monumental task of consolidating Gran Colombia and establishing stable, viable republics. However, the very success of liberation unleashed a complex web of challenges, as ideological differences, regional loyalties, and personal ambitions began to tear at the fabric of his grand design. Bolivar, once the undisputed military leader, now found himself navigating a treacherous political landscape, often clashing with his former comrades and allies. The most significant and painful of these conflicts was with Francisco de Paula Santander, his vice president in Gran Colombia. While Bolivar was engaged in the arduous campaigns to the south, Santander had been governing from Bogotá, fostering a more liberal and federalist political system. Upon Bolivar's return, the fundamental differences in their political philosophies became irreconcilable. Bolivar, increasingly convinced that the fledgling republics needed a strong, centralized government to prevent anarchy and foreign intervention, leaned towards an authoritarian model, even contemplating a lifetime presidency. Santander, conversely, championed a more democratic, decentralized system with a strong emphasis on legal process and legislative power. This ideological rift deepened into a bitter personal animosity, fragmenting the very leadership that had achieved independence. The regionalist tendencies within Gran Colombia also escalated. Venezuela, under the de facto leadership of José Antonio Páez, increasingly chafed under Bogotá's authority, yearning for greater autonomy. Similarly, Ecuador felt its unique identity and interests were being subsumed by the larger union. These movements for separation, fueled by local caudillos and economic grievances, relentlessly chipped away at Bolivar's dream of unity. His attempts to mediate these disputes, often by traveling extensively across the vast territory, proved largely ineffective as his authority. Once unquestioned on the battlefield, began to wane in the face of political intrigue and provincial aspirations. The political climate grew increasingly hostile. Bolívar, who had spent years fighting for freedom, found himself increasingly isolated and branded by his critics as an aspiring dictator. There were several attempts on his life, most notably the September Conspiracy of 1828, a dramatic assassination attempt in Bogotá, from which he narrowly escaped, famously aided by his companion Manuela Sáenz. This event shattered his remaining illusions about the loyalty of some of his former comrades and deepened his distrust of the political factions surrounding him. The constant betrayals, the relentless accusations, and the unceasing struggle to hold Gran Colombia together took a severe toll on his health and spirit. By 1829, Gran Colombia was on the verge of collapse. Venezuela, led by Páez, formally declared its separation, followed by Ecuador. Bolívar, heartbroken and exhausted, saw his life's work crumbling before his eyes. He has sacrificed his personal life, his wealth, and his health for the cause of unity and liberty, only to witness the very nations he had liberated tearing themselves apart. The bitterness of this decline was profound, a stark contrast to the triumphant years of military glory. He resigned from the presidency of Gran Colombia in April 1830, a broken man, disillusioned by the ingratitude and political fragmentation that plagued his creations. The weight of his immense responsibilities, coupled with the profound disappointment of his shattered vision, led him into a final, sorrowful exile. Death and lasting legacy stripped of his authority, disillusioned, and plagued by illness, Simón Bolívar embarked on his final journey. His resignation in April 1830 marked the bitter end of his political career, but not the end of his suffering. His once robust health, eroded by years of relentless campaigning, political strife, and the emotional toll of constant betrayal, began to deteriorate rapidly. He was afflicted by tuberculosis, a disease that progressively consumed his weakened body. The man who had traversed mountains and battled empires was now frail, his breath short, his once fiery spirit dimmed by profound disappointment. As he traveled towards the coast, seeking passage to Europe, a path for yet another exile, the news of his passing spread through the fledgling republics. He was no longer the all-powerful liberator, but a fading figure, his grand vision of a united Gran Colombia shattered into independent fragments. Venezuela, New Granada, which would eventually become Colombia, and Ecuador. The continent he had freed now seemed to reject the very unity he believed was essential for its survival. His final days were spent in isolation, at the Quinta de San Pedro Alejandrino, a hacienda near Santa Marta, on the Caribbean coast of New Granada. On December 17, 1830, at the age of 47, Simón Bolívar drew his last breath. His death marked the end of an era, but it was a quiet, almost forgotten passing, far removed from the thunder of battlefields and the cheers of liberated masses. The last words attributed to him, "My last wishes are for the happiness of the fatherland. If my death contributes to the cessation of partisanship and the consolidation of the Union, I shall go to the grave in peace," reflected his enduring concern for the unity and well-being of the nations he had brought into being, even as they fractured around him. In the immediate aftermath of his death, Bolívar's reputation endured a period of decline and controversy. The political factions he had battled continued to paint him as a tyrant or a failed statesman. Yet, as the decades passed and the newly independent nations wrestled with their own identities and challenges, the immense scope of his achievements began to be reevaluated. Historians and political thinkers slowly peeled back the layers of contemporary political animosity to reveal the magnitude of his contributions. Bolívar's legacy is monumental and complex. He is revered as El Libertador, the man who led 6 nations, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Panama, and Boliviano independence from Spanish rule. His military campaigns across the vast and challenging terrain of South America are regarded as some of the most audacious and successful in history. Beyond the battlefield, his political thought, articulated in documents like the Manifesto of Cartagena and the Letter from Jamaica, continues to inspire discussions on republicanism, unity, and governance in Latin America. His vision of a united South America, though ultimately unrealized in its original form, remains a potent symbol of regional integration and solidarity. Today, Simón Bolívar is a national hero in all the countries he liberated, his name etched into countless streets, plazas, and institutions. His ideals, particularly his fervent belief in continental unity and his unwavering commitment to republican principles, continue to resonate across Latin America. While the Grand Colombia he envisioned did not endure, his efforts laid the groundwork for the modern nations of the region. He remains a towering figure, a testament to the power of one individual's will to reshape a continent, a visionary who, despite the personal tragedies and political betrayals he endured, fundamentally altered the course of history for millions. His life was a whirlwind of glory and despair, a testament to the intoxicating, yet often heartbreaking pursuit of liberty.